You are calling from a 208 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Josh from Spokane.
Hey, Josh. What's on your mind?
First of all, I just want to say you guys are killing it.
Well, thank you.
As of like the summer of this year, I was like a full-blown libertarian.
Wow.
And you guys like straight up converted me, and super grateful for that.
I bet everything. I feel like Trump. I bet you're feeling much more mellow, much more cool.
Yes.
Your dating life is a lot more successful. You're not getting into weird arguments with people. You're a much better person.
You're not defending being against civil rights.
Yeah, you're not defending apartheid because of gold. You're doing great.
Well, I live in Spokane, so I'm in like the reddest part of Washington,
right.
And I grew up in Idaho. Like I was basically brought up on Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, so
wow. Damn.
I've been able to narrowly avoid some arguments, but I mean, one of the things that you guys really helped me out with is like, conservative background. Like, there's such a de-emphasis on, research and looking into facts, and there's such an emphasis on principles and philosophy. And like, I'm a big psychology and philosophy guy. I'm in the field of psychology, so that really clicked with my brain when I was, a young person. But
right.
Just your guys' ability to analyze that's been really helpful. But in my attempt to try and, do my part in, kind of combating misinformation and trying to approach it more from not an ethos, but like a philosophical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've noticed, and I'd like your feedback on this, because I know you guys have had a lot more experience dealing with conservatism as an ideology. But what struck me is that...
No, I bet you have, actually, to be honest, man. It sounds like you were in it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, from the other side, like, cause,
okay.
I don't know how familiar you guys are with psychology, but are you generally aware of the whole theory of cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, to some degree, sure. I mean, if you'd like to define it, I think it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I don't know how many people actually have a good definition of it, to be honest.
Okay, so cognitive dissonance is basically, you can think of it like a form of hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you smoking is bad, but you smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this dissonance in your cognitive structure, so to speak. And so basically, the theory of cognitive dissonance is that having that is uncomfortable, psychologically speaking.
Right.
You have to do something with that. You can't just live a contradiction and be okay with that for the most part. So a lot of times people will justify it, or they'll quit smoking, or they'll just say, maybe it isn't that bad for you. They'll come up with some way basically to diffuse that tension.
Right.
And there's a really specific kind of structure of cognitive dissonance called the belief in a just world,
mm-hmm.
which is specifically cognitive dissonance used for like victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
you see that, something horrible happened to someone, and rather than try and figure out like, what the actual cause of this is, you just say, well, that person probably deserved it because, the police wouldn't actually shoot someone who wasn't guilty.
Right, and you can move it up the metaphysical scale. You could say that they've offended God somehow, or it's their karma, whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And so, what seems to me is like that's maybe not the entire realm of conservatism, but it seems to be a huge, like, have the lion's share of kind of their principles, because you go from things from wealth inequality and this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and that the system is just because we were able to use it to, live a good life. Why would that be any different for someone who's in the inner cities?
Yep.
Why would that be different if your skin's a different color? And then they'll use things like, the color of your skin shouldn't matter, to create this false equivalency to say that just because your life shouldn't have any difference because of the color of your skin, that it doesn't.
Right.
And
Right.
basically there's this whole self-reinforcing thing that this kind of, the whole thing with Trump would make America great again, that there's this kind of phantom America that is good and that is just, and basically that they leverage that belief that the system, that this, idealistic America is just, and that we just need to get back to that. And so, anyway, I don't know. I've just been trying to figure this out because I've got a really good relationship with my family, and I'd rather not fuck that up.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think family is different. I mean, I think that there's also a lot of different versions of it, to be honest with you. I think that one of the things that's been disturbing to me, I actually talked with a friend. I talked with Max Blumenthal about this years ago. And we were talking about when he was, because he did a book called Republican Gomorrah, which is a pretty good book. It's a very good book on the sort of religious right dimension of all of this stuff, which is still potent, but it's less ascendant now, it seems. And this is like in 2012. So we were talking about Andrew Breitbart, probably around the time he died. And what he was saying was, like, when he would report it on these Christian, like the real Christian dominionist fanatics, they still had the ethos that, like, you have to be polite to the visitor. You have to, there was some like social inculcation of, like, at least sort of social norms of what you would associate with Christianity. And now we're moving into this place of, like, just pure sort of like hierarchy, dominator kind of abuse and enjoyment. Like, you saw this, there was a video that came out during Obamacare when, it was like these people were protesting Obamacare and they were berating a homeless guy who was disabled. And it was sort of like this point of, like, the shift from different ways of justifying those hierarchies, but one of them where it was like this real enjoyment of kind of hierarchy and abuse. I think there's other people, there's a documentary called Color of Fear, I think it's called, where it's just basically, I saw it in college, but I remember that it's this kind of racially diverse group of men basically having a conversation about gender and race specific. And I don't remember how the people were selected, but it was supposed to be all men and it was racially balanced in a certain way. And there was one white guy who just simply wouldn't, like, he was the stereotype of the, like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Everything's great. And then there was this moment where another guy, this guy Victor Lewis, who's an educator, really called him out. And he actually got almost teared up. And he was like, well, if what you're saying is true, then that's just horrible. And I don't know how to live in that country, basically.
Yeah.
So he actually had a conscience. It just was obfuscated by all the bullshit. But, the last thing I'll say is I think some of it, I do think of it psychologically, because I just think some of it is, like, in certain models of development I've seen, that maturity is correlated with an expanded circle of concern. So if you're born and all you can perceive is yourself, because there's no separation between, like, a baby's identity and everything is just kind of, it's totally innocent and fine, but there's no distinction between, like, well, a baby's not going to not cry because someone else is sleeping and will be woken up, right? Because all they can perceive is their own kind of experience of the world. And then there's a notion and then it extends to family, and you think of your family, and then it extends potentially to your group. And then, ultimately it has to have some type of global expansion where you realize, and again, maybe from an anthropological perspective, that's all made up and fictitious too. And, the foundations of things like human rights are really slippery, but there is
there is definitely a tribal pattern to that.
Yeah. But you evolve through in a broadened field of care and empathy. And it does seem that a lot of politics, to drastically simplify it, does involve on that level, when you're talking the level of psychology. Other stuff is just power, interest, and those types of things, which I think we focus on more. But I think that the part that you're talking about, a lot of it could just be measured by whom do you consider to be part of your circle of care, essentially? And there are divisions in that. But yeah, that's my kind of last thought on it. You have a final thought before we jump off?
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense because you're talking about like legitimizing hierarchies, and like that's true in some aspects, but like the far right does a lot to delegitimize like elites in a lot of other areas.
Totally. Totally.
Hollywood and
well, they're into money,
and,
money hierarchy.
Even just rappers.
Yeah, well, rappers are.
What's that?
Rappers are. Well, we all know why they might delegitimize rappers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an interesting idea with the circle of care and like who they're actually concerned about. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I think what's the final thought I had, and I think that my strategy so far has been like dealing with my parents. Like recently, my mom told me she heard on the radio like they had one of their their stable of African American conservatives come on and talk about how entitled young black men are, and that there was some book about it she wanted to get. And
Jesus Christ.
I know, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, well, like, what the fuck? Like, you talk about how every goddamn millennial is entitled. Like, what's so special about this? And so I just asked, like, so what's different? Like, what makes young black men more entitled than apparently every young person who's entitled?
Right.
And she's like, oh, I don't know. I never thought about that. And I think just identifying the cognitive dissonance, not on necessarily a fact level, but even just like within their own psychology, be like, you got some problems with this. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a great point.
Thank you
I
guys
appreciate
for
the call.
fighting the good fight.
Thanks. I hope you keep calling in, man. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Subscribe.